Good afternoon, and you're back on Psych Weekly with me, Ashleigh Horovitz, your trusty science journalist, shining a light on the psychology behind our everyday decisions. With the death row tolls across the country here in Australia hitting a 15-year high, understanding the psychology behind risky driving has never been more urgent. So, we are going to look at why do some people take risks behind the wheel, like speeding, tailgating, or overtaking dangerously, even when they know it's unsafe. Is it just about chasing adrenaline? Or could it have more to do with how we're wired to chase success? I want you all to think of a time that you have ever tried to beat the car next to you at the lights, or felt like you had something to prove after someone cut you off. These behaviors might not just be about that moment, they could reflect deeper motivations. In the past year, 1,337 people have lost their lives on Australian roads. As mentioned, that's the highest toll in 15 years. With that comes billions in economic costs and, of course, the emotional impact. Australia's goal is 0 deaths on our roads by 2050. But we're still losing over 1,200 lives a year. So, what's missing? Infrastructure and enforcement help, but they don't explain why people still take risks. That's where today's research comes in, unpacking how motivation and mindset shape our behavior. To explore this, I'm unpacking a study done in 2021 out of France by Mascret and colleagues. The research investigated how the achievement goals we set, for example, wanting to master something or outperform others, could drive our appetite for sensation, ultimately increasing the chances of taking risks behind the wheel. So, let's get into it. The study is grounded in something called achievement goal theory, which basically looks at the different types of goals people adopt when trying to succeed or avoid failure. There are 4 key types. Mastery approach goals, where you're driven by learning and improving yourself. Mastery avoidance goals, where you're trying to not decline or fail. Performance approach goals, where the focus is on doing better than others. And performance avoidance goals, where you're motivated by avoiding doing worse than others. Now, add in sensation seeking, that natural drive some of us have to chase exciting or even risky experiences. People who are high in sensation seeking are more likely to engage in behaviors that give them that rush, which, you guessed it, includes risky driving. So, the researchers asked, could some of these goal types increase someone's tendency to seek sensations? And could that in turn lead to riskier driving? To find out, they surveyed 341 French drivers. 234 were women and 107 were men. They were aged between 18 and 73 and with an average age of just over 30. These drivers weren't brand new drivers. On average, they'd held their license for more than 11 years and they drove around 14,000 kilometers per year. In terms of driving frequency, nearly half, 48%, drove every day. Around 28% drove at least 3 times per week, and the remaining 24% drove less than that. The participants completed standardized questionnaires measuring their achievement goals, how much they crave stimulation or sensation seeking, and their tendency to engage in risky driving behaviors. To make sense of how these factors are connected, the researchers used something called structural equation modeling. Think of it like drawing a map of cause and effect. This method helps test whether sensation seeking acts as a bridge between someone's goals and their risky driving behaviors. So, what did they find? 2 specific goals goal types were significantly linked to higher sensation seeking. Mastery avoidance goals, so being motivated to avoid failing or getting worse, and performance approach goals, which is the drive to outperform others. In both cases, higher levels of sensation seeking predicted riskier driving behaviors. So, if someone's motivation is to avoid failure or beat others, they may also be drawn to intense experiences, and that sensation seeking could show up as risky behavior behind the wheel. Interestingly, though, people with mastery approach goals, so those who are focused on self-improvement, did not show this pattern. Their drive to grow and learn was not linked to risky driving. Maybe, if anything, maybe it's a protective factor. This gives us powerful psychological insight. It's not ambition itself that's risky, but the kind of ambition. The study suggests that risky driving isn't always impulsive or careless. Sometimes it stems from the same goal-driven mindset that pushes us to succeed. But when that drive is paired with a craving for stimulation or speed, it can turn dangerous and quickly. So now let's also look at the strengths and weaknesses of the study. Some of the strengths of the study is that it used well-established psychological theories and strong statistical modeling. It is also one of the few studies connecting motivation to driving behavior. And as well, the participant pool was fairly diverse in age, in experience, and in driving habits. It is important to note that this study was not without its limitations, though. First, the entire study relied on self-reported data, which means participants were asked to reflect on and report on their own behaviors. While this is a common approach in psychology, it can introduce bias. People might overestimate or downplay how risky they actually are behind the wheel, either intentionally or just because it's hard to be totally objective about ourselves. Another weakness or limitation was that the study was conducted solely with French drivers. That matters because driving behaviors and road norms can vary a lot from country to country. So, while the finding gives us valuable insights, we can't assume they apply directly to drivers in places like Australia or anywhere else without further research. And lastly, the sample only included car drivers, no motorcyclists or other types of road users. And I think that's a gap worth exploring, especially since sensation seeking and risk taking are often even more pronounced among riders. Future research should definitely include a broader range of drivers to see how these findings hold up. So, what can we take away from all of this? Well, for driver education programs, it is not just about teaching road rules or penalties. This research suggests we should be able to help drivers reflect on their motivations, particularly those who are competitive or fear of failure. If someone's internal drive is to always outperform others or avoid looking incompetent, that mindset might spill into how they drive. They might be more likely to speed, take risks overtaking, or tailgate, not just for the thrill, but because their self-worth is tied to performance. Helping drivers become aware of this link could be a powerful tool in changing behavior. And when it comes to public health campaigns, this study shows that it's not enough to just say, slow down or don't drink and drive. Messaging that taps into people's values and sense of identity, like being a responsible driver, protecting others, or striving for personal growth, might actually speak to the psychological drivers behind risky behavior. Instead of fear-based campaigns, we may see more success with ones that promote self-awareness, reflection, and pride in safe decision-making. This study also suggests that risky driving might not just be about thrill seeking. It might reflect a person's deeper motivational orientation. If someone is constantly trying to prove themselves or avoid failure, those patterns could extend into how they drive. But that's also the good news, because mindsets can change. We can move from fear-based or competitive motivation to growth-focused ones. And when we do, we're not just improving ourselves, but we might be making the roads a little safer too. So next time you're setting a goal or merging onto the freeway, ask yourself, what is really driving me? Join me again next week for another informative session on Psych Weekly. Thank you.